So I stayed in this cycle of chaos all the time. Like life was just chaotic. I thrived off of it. I made so many jokes about it. It was like an identity. It was like my entire personality was chaos. Kids were chaotic. I was chaotic. Life was chaotic. There was a time in my life where I was constantly reacting. I thought success would come whenever somebody validated and told me I was successful, when I got a certain accomplishment, when I reached a certain level in my life. But underneath all of that, underneath all of my push, all of my drive, all of my hustle, I was absolutely drowning. I was burdened by all of the responsibility, all of the things that I needed to get done, all of the tasks, all of the external situations were pushing me and burdening me down further and further and further. And I kept on that path until I finally decided and realized that by staying in this cycle, I was actually derailing my success in business, but also my happiness in life. I was creating so many different channels for me to be unhappy. And I was validating that through so many different avenues in my life. So, what I did and what I want to talk about today is how when you make these emotional shifts internally, how that actually shifts your reality, how that actually changes the success in your business, how that actually changes the success in your relationships, how that actually changes the success in your relationship with yourself. And so for me, when I go back to that version of me and I sit here and I reflect on it and I think, what was that like? I was constantly overwhelmed. I was always creating and in situations that caused a challenge, and then there was something I needed to overcome. So I was definitely stepping into my overcomer state. I needed to create and be a victim so then I could overcome it. And that was constant. There was absolutely nothing that happened in my life that I didn't feel like I was just this ball of stress all the time. I was like, go, go, go. It's my natural energy is to just create and to move and to flow. But now I've channeled that into a space where it becomes very productive and very effective in a way that's not overwhelming. Now I'm actually working with my natural flow of this really beautiful way of interacting with the world. And before it seemed like a burden because nothing was ever good enough. I was never good enough. I always had to go, go, go to prove something to somebody else or to something else outside of me. And I was always waiting for that validation. And so, whenever for me in this journey of this release, it didn't happen overnight. That's kind of what everyone hopes. It's so subtle you barely notice it. Sometimes you have these big shifts, and sometimes there are these little bitty nuggets that we oftentimes overlook. So, I really challenge you one, now take some time to look at that. Look at the little shifts that have happened for you. Maybe it's a big shift, but look for the smaller shifts in your life where you realize, oh, I don't do that anymore. Or, oh, I don't have that same habit. Or, oh, I don't react the same way as I did before. All right, so we're going to start off with just that noticing, but I want to go back to kind of looking at what this was like for me because this version of me today has not always been present. Like I said, I was this ball of energy. I was always creating, always going, always moving, always on to the next thing. Before I even finished this thing, I was always on to the next thing, right? I didn't even have completed tasks because I would get so excited about the next thing. And we're not labeling that, we're not diagnosing that as ADHD or anything like that. That's just how I operate. And that's what was present for me. And I was using it as a way to escape being comfortable with myself. I was using it as a way to not look inside to see what I was really afraid of. Because I was afraid to slow down. Because if I slowed down, then I would have to actually sit with myself. And then I would have to discover some things that were inside of me that maybe I didn't want to address because it was so much easier to stay in this state of overwhelm and push and go and go and go and go and not actually step back and reflect and not actually take radical responsibility for what was coming up in my life. So I created all these external challenges, and some of them were self created, and some of them were just life challenges, right? I got 4 kids, life happens. So things come into your path, of course, as an external challenge. But our relationship to that challenge is what can change. And that's when we can release that level of overwhelm. That's when we can really do the deep emotional shifts and have higher levels of success. So for me, And what I challenge you to do is ask yourself where you are feeling so distant and where you are really truly not being honest with yourself. What are you not wanting to see within you? And if you really want to make a shift, you have to answer that question. You have to say, what is present? If I close my eyes, I take a deep breath, and I allow the first thing to arise, and I immediately want to suppress it, what is that? What is that thing you're afraid to look head on? And when we start to do that deep emotional work and we start to unpack these things within us and we start to say, I am capable of moving through this, I actually do want to shift my external environment by working on my internal world. That's what happened for me. So I stayed in this cycle of chaos all the time. Like life was just chaotic. I thrived off of it. I made so many jokes about it. It was like an identity. It was like my entire personality was chaos. Kids were chaotic. I was chaotic. Life was chaotic. It was a whole personality, and I was so attached to it. And I truly didn't know who I would be without the chaos. But what I was really afraid of is that who I would be without the chaos would be someone who wasn't successful, would be someone who couldn't sustain success. Because up until that point, everything I had ever done was blame the chaos in my life that prevented me from getting to the success that I wanted. So if I released that, then I was having to release the idea that I couldn't sustain it, or I was really going to find out that I could or couldn't. And so when I stopped boxing myself in, when I started asking myself, what does this really mean to me? What is this rooted in? Why do I even believe this about myself to begin with? Where is this conditioning from? It's just changing the relationship with yourself instead of trying to outrun yourself as fast as you can. As fast as you can, trying to run in the other direction from truth telling and honesty with yourself. Whenever you really dive straight into it, it's uncomfortable, it is uncertain, but I guarantee what you'll find will get you to the other side, will get you to that sense of freedom, will expand you in ways you never thought possible. But you have to be willing to go there. So to go there, you have to be willing to see what you're afraid of. What am I afraid of? For me, I was afraid of sustaining success. I was afraid that everyone would finally see that I was just so stupid. And why did I even try to begin with? I was confirming all of these things that I already thought in my head. So I was avoiding them. So you'll be able to see that, and then you'll be able to start to change your relationship with it. So for me, I had to realize, well, you know what? I'm either going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy and stay in this space where I keep self-sabotaging when I get momentum and I pull myself back, and I'll never get higher than this block right here. Right? This is my ceiling. I put my ceiling on myself. I'll never bust through that ceiling because I won't let myself do that because I'm going to continue to sabotage and sabotage and sabotage until I decide not to. Right? So this word self-sabotage comes up so much, and it's just something we have to be aware of and we have to be able to release it. So we're doing this deep inner work. We're willing to be honest with ourselves, and we're willing to see the ways that we prevent our momentum from continuing. That's what I had to be honest with myself about. This isn't external factors. This isn't my children. It's not my husband. It's not my life. It's not all the life events that keep happening to me that derail my success. It's my relationship with myself and the trust and belief in my capabilities that is truly derailing my success. And how can I change my relationship with that? How can I actually start to identify what are the thoughts and beliefs that come up at the result of me taking action? And when I would do that and I would take action and then I would feel contracted, I would say, why am I feeling contracted? What does this mean to me? What does it mean about me? And what are the stories and beliefs that are rising to the surface right now when I have to put myself out on social media, when I have to talk into a camera, when I have to do all of those things? What are the stories that I attach to the feeling of contraction? And once you understand that, you can start to break those stories apart very, very, very quickly. You can say, well, it doesn't matter if people accept me. It doesn't matter if whatever it is you're afraid of, you can start to dissect them and you can say, I'm still safe doing this and showing up that way. But you have to change that relationship with your abilities as well. You have to say, man, I may not be the strongest person at this, right? I may not be the person that knows everything about this, but I am definitely going to be the person that tries because what I've created in my life right now, I want to bust through that ceiling. What I had, I was content. I was happy. I had success, but it wasn't the level of success I wanted. I knew I could bust through that ceiling if I just allowed that ceiling to open. And so I had to see what was constructed, what made up that ceiling for me. What were the stories and beliefs, and how could I bust through them? How could I shift my narrative, shift my relationship with myself, and shift my relationship with success? And how could I see so freaking clearly about what I was doing and what I was afraid of? And for me, and for a lot of people, a lot of clients I work with, their biggest fear is how they will sustain success and how they will be perceived through the success. So it's not success itself, it's the sustainability or what success brings to the surface for them. And that could be exposure, it could be so many different things. But what we're doing here, and the reason why this is so important, because if I didn't do that, if I didn't do this work, if I didn't say, yes, I need to go inside of me, then I would be exactly where I was at. Honestly, I probably wouldn't even have a business. I would have quit a long time ago. That's why this work is so important. That's why you have to be willing to step into that uncomfortable space of going inside. And you have to be willing to do that, or you're going to stay exactly where you're at today. You're going to be here. If I check in with you next year, guaranteed you're going to tell me the same thing. You're still experiencing different things. Maybe it's the external situation's a little different, but everything that's happening inside of you is going to be exactly the same until you step in to that responsibility to work through it. So it's absolutely so important to begin to open up into this expanded state of, I need to do the deep work so I can change the external environment. And if I want this external environment to be different, if I want to change my relationship to success and the sustainability of that success, then I'm going to have to change my relationship with myself. And to change your relationship with yourself, that means you have to start to challenge all the thoughts and beliefs that you've built this paradigm and this reality on. So for me, that was the biggest thing. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't finding the right people to even come into my life to help me. It was really trusting myself to help myself, to really move through my own shit that was happening for me to be able to show up in my business so my business could then show up in the world so people could be attracted to it. And so if you want that success, you have to start questioning where you're at and why you're there and what ceiling you're putting on yourself. And it's not a ceiling constructed from anyone else. So don't go down that route. It is your ceiling, it is your beliefs, it is your conditioning, it is your experience that keeps you at this level. So if you're ready to bust through that level, start to question everything that you know.